The next presentation is from Steve Wateridge and Chloe Bartlam of Razor Research and Philip Waite of the BBC. The presentation title is #Unfiltered, Tapping into the Worlds of Younger Audiences. The unfiltered approach centers on seeing the world through the eyes of younger audiences. Razor know from experience that it can be difficult to gain access to the real worlds of younger people. So they have created a digital, connected research approach that taps into the way Gen Z are primarily communicating. Razor believe the unfiltered approach will challenge clients and researchers to consider less traditional research approaches, especially when working with these younger, digitally engrossed, highly creative audiences. They'll demonstrate how clients that are brave enough to give broad and open-minded briefs and commission unusual research methods can be rewarded with richer insights and be more inspired along the research journey. We now have Steve's screen up in front of you, so I am going to pass over to Steve, Chloe and Philip. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you, John Cohen, for that excellent presentation on WhatsApp. I think it does very much, it is very relevant and relates very much to some of the things that we shall be talking about in this presentation. So very, very useful. Yes, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's in good health and that you can all hear me and see the presentation. I just want to check first up that my co-presenters are here and are hearing me. So Chloe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, everyone.
Fantastic. Hello. And Phil, are you there as well up in Salford?
I am, yes. Hello, everyone.
Fantastic. That's great. So yeah, we're all here. We're correct. So yeah, my name is Steve Wateridge, founder of Razor, and I'm joined today by my colleague Chloe Bartlam, who's an associate partner at Razor, and Philip Waite, who is head of audience research at the BBC in Salford. So in this presentation, we're going to share with you the original brief from the BBC, our response, including outputs from the actual project, and finally the impact that it actually has overall on the BBC. So that's the order of events and how we're actually going to be playing that today. Firstly, though, we'd like to cast your minds back actually to last summer. Remember when sport was actually being played? What a goodness me, what a memory. And 2019 was an extraordinary and epic summer of sport, as probably everybody is aware. Who can forget like the Rugby World Cup and how close we came to lifting that trophy, or the nail-biting Tour de France, if you remember that, the enthralling Ashes, or the greatest one-day cricket match in history at Lord's even. Or even the longest, possibly the longest, the most dramatic Wimbledon final ever. I mean, all of these things only happened a few months ago, and how incredible that was. But as was, of course, the focus for this project, which was the Women's World Cup, which did actually shatter viewing records and indeed many rusty old prejudices at the same time. From my perspective, I certainly wouldn't forget, I think Megan Rapinoe repeatedly sticking it to Donald Trump. But anyway, that's another story. I'd like now to hand over to Phil, who's going to talk you through his original research brief to us.
Thanks, Steve. So yeah, I don't think we're alone in rising to the challenge of engaging with younger audiences. We've got the backdrop of this kind of Generation Z cohort growing up with broadband, truly digital natives, spending lots of time with social media. You've got the tech giants, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., vying for their attention. Gaming is huge. So everybody's kind of got that backdrop to contend with, and on top of that, we've had a number of kind of new entrants into the sport market, typically digital entrants to the sport market, who are specifically targeting a young audience. And obviously at the BBC and BBC Sport, we've got to kind of serve all sport fans. So there's quite a competitive backdrop to all of this, and with regards to our understanding of our young sports fans and where we were before we briefed in Razor with this research project. We did have a good understanding of where we were and kind of our relative performance with our competitors. We knew kind of where sports fans were going and what they're engaging with, kind of knew what we needed to do from engaging the sports fans more. But what I kind of observed with some of the research we were looking at, and a lot of industry standard kind of data, and the meetings we were having with our stakeholders, our decision makers and content makers, is that we were a lot of it was numbers based, and we were informing and advising kind of next steps and things to think about and ideas for new content strands, etc. But what we really want to do with our stakeholders and our content makers, etc., is to inspire them and to really kind of ram home that point that we are dealing with a different type of sports consumer with this young audience in today's date. And it's very different to what some of our stakeholders and content makers are used to. So yeah, so we really need to kind of inspire our stakeholders and really get them to take action and to walk a mile in this our young sports fans' shoes, to really kind of understand their world, their behaviours, what they like, what they don't like. So that was kind of a broad brief that I gave to Steve and the team at the start with this. So just hand over back to Steve.
Thanks very much, Phil. Yeah, it certainly was an open brief, and we took that in a positive way. We all know how difficult it is to gain access to the real world of young people. Certainly, you know, we know they're tech savvy, they've grown up online, they're used to consuming content on multiple devices and indeed across multiple platforms, you know, often simultaneously. So that's all happening, and they communicate with friends sort of most naturally via social media, particularly via WhatsApp, and that was a theme obviously that we were exploiting in this piece as part of the research. And they very much have a sort of "I want it now" mentality, and that short attention span that John was talking about earlier, but as I'm sure you know many of you have all witnessed with older teenage children as well. So that was the brief, you know, unfiltered. I mean, traditional research approaches can only take you so far, and at best, we believe, sort of deliver an edited version of the truth. So we created an approach that was designed to get inside their world, and we've called the new approach Unfiltered, representing the more raw, authentic outputs that are generated. So I want to explain very briefly how Unfiltered actually works. So firstly, with people Unfiltered, and I think rather than attempting to understand younger audiences through the lens of a market researcher, what we do is we recruit a seed pair, and we call them collaborators. They're essentially bright, aspiring young people. But they're not respondents in the conventional sense of the word. So the difference here is that we use specialist sites like Milk Round or our own social networks, and through a process of you know quite extensive interviewing, we then hire 2 collaborators into Razor. It's not an easy brief, so they need to be articulate, great communicators. They need to be enthusiastic. They need to be fanatical even about the topic in hand. They need to also be creative and digitally savvy, and certainly be willing to reach out to their networks of upwards of 15 people, and that can often be more. And finally, they must also commit to being based in our office. It's important also just to stress on this that each contributor within the networks that they reach out to does sign GDPR compliance forms. It's all very much, you know, an important thing that we adhere to throughout the whole process. And all content that we receive is anonymized. So that's the key aspects of actually how we recruit these collaborators for Unfiltered. Conversations Unfiltered, secondly. So our collaborators are actually mentored and coached to go out and mine their personal networks for those more deeper real life behavioral insights and interactions, and they communicating, you know, as they would do normally with all their with their network. You know, there are typically like 2 phases to an Unfiltered project. It's worth highlighting these. The early phase is more geared towards understanding those kind of more natural behaviors and conversations as they spontaneously occur. But during the latter phases, it does become more directed, and it can be more directed, where we might need to probe specifics in more depth. Now, sometimes this doesn't need to happen because the conversations naturally evolve during the course of an event, so it may not be necessary. But you know, there might be times when we do that. And in the World Cup project, for example, we were towards the end of the tournament, so kind of week 5 and 6, we started to really probe on specifics to get as much out of the study as possible. The length of the project, though, can vary. You know, this would be, as I said, a 6-week tournament, or it could be 2 to 3 weeks in terms of any other event. So the collaborators upload their daily content onto a bespoke website that they themselves create. A website is actually more cost effective than a standard digital platform, and it means that they have ownership of it completely. They create it, they create the architecture, and it's shared with the project team and indeed with clients daily, edited only by the collaborators. So clients can also meet with the collaborators themselves and certainly check in with them during the whole process. And then finally, just unfiltered truth. So our collaborators are the best owners of their story. So armed with their knowledge and with their observations, they work with us to build the story before they deliver these unfiltered truths in person. And this is where the real power of this approach comes to life. Connecting the different teams within an organization directly with the consumers. And I think that's one of the things that really came through with the World Cup project. It's the true collaboration and consumer closeness in action. So I'm now going to hand over to Chloe, who is going to talk you through the Women's World Cup project and bring some of this content to life.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. So the first thing that I will be doing is talking through some of the content that we captured in more detail. So if we go to the next slide. Thanks, Steve. So the first thing I'm going to do is introduce our collaborators, Ellie and Ornella. And as Steve's already said, they were absolutely fantastic. So they were recruited through social and student sites and then brought into the Razor office for a proper briefing before the project actually kicked off. So as well as being Gen Z, one of the most important things to us was that our collaborators were sports enthusiasts. So Ellie, for example, was a keen footballer and hockey player. And as well as playing semi-professional football, Ornella also coached for her local junior team. It was also really important to us that our members were members of different sports clubs and had wide groups of friends that we could tap into their networks. Our collaborators were also based in different parts of the country, so we had north and south split, and they would have diverse networks as well, so made up of both male and female viewers. The final tick for us was that they were both tech savvy and creative in some way, so whether that be through video editing, blogging, graphic design, so they could then transfer those skills to our research project. So we helped our seed respondents to create a bespoke website, as Steve mentioned at the start, that they, the project team and clients could log into. The website could be logged into at any point, and it was also password protected for added security. I think a really important to make, again, and as Steve already mentioned, is that this was very much their own project, so they structured it in their own way. And what was really helpful for us was that they structured it through those different group stages so that we could see their viewer behaviour as it evolved throughout the course of the tournament. The website hosted all of their content throughout the games, and this included things like news articles that captured their attention, videos, voice notes, and WhatsApp conversations. And this was split, again, as Steve mentioned, between their natural behaviour at the very start of the tournament, and then changed to more focused questions from the BBC towards the end of the tournament and as the games progressed. So we're now going to show some examples from the website we were able to capture. So this is just some of the screenshots that we've grabbed, but we had hot topics, which was things like who the key players were. There was debates around the pitch size last year, so should women really be playing on the same pitch size as the men? We're also able to cover any controversies that happened in games. We were able to cover match day viewing, which we'll come on to in a bit more detail in a second. Our collaborators were also able to capture what they were seeing on the different social platforms. So this was things like Snapchat, Instagram and Twitter, which gave us an insight into how they're viewing across those different platforms. The hot topics from those social channels were also then used by our collaborators to actually prompt and probe their networks, which generated even more conversation. So I'm now going to move us on to showing you some of the raw, unfiltered content that we were actually able to capture.
Actually pretty special, to be fair. Like, the crowd is insane. There's thousands of people here. I thought it wasn't going to be very busy.
So we really love those video clips, and as you've seen, with the help of our collaborators, we were able to take a sneak peek into a range of different natural environments. So basically, wherever they went and when they engaged with the World Cup, we asked them to record it. So as you can see on there, we saw sports clubs, we saw pubs, and amazingly, we also managed to take a sneak peek into the big screens at Glastonbury. And this gave us a real feel for the energy and momentum that was starting to build over the course of the tournament, and also showed us how media consumption was starting to evolve and change. And we were also able to tap into our collaborators' WhatsApp chats. So this is just a screenshot to show some examples. And again, obviously this was all GDPR approved. As Steve mentioned again at the start, both of the girls had access to a network of at least 15 people each, which meant that we were hearing from at least 30 young viewers at different points throughout the tournament. And as these were sports enthusiasts and football fans, our collaborators were naturally talking about all of these things in their WhatsApp chats, which meant that we were getting a real read of the natural conversation. And then towards the later stages, we were able to prompt and probe on specifics for the BBC when they fed in prompts. We also asked the girls to create viewing diaries, and these are diaries they have edited themselves with actually no help from us. So we're able to see how they view in the pub and at home. And then we've also got Ellie's example in the pub.
So we're in the same pub as Wednesday. Obviously, this is the first knockout game, so general consensus from a lot of the people that I've known have been that the support, the momentum, everything's going to build as the tournament goes on. That just got put on, which is
So as you can see from those videos, we were able to capture who they were watching it with, how exactly they were watching it, and the big moments of excitement and indeed disappointment over the course of each match. And towards the end of the tournament, we started to kind of create mini researchers. So we had more directional questions from the BBC and gave them the opportunity to feed in with specific probes. We gave the girls research training, which included handy tips and tricks to get the most out of their network's responses. And our collaborators then conducted their own interviews, both in and out of home, and fed back to us.
I think I've got more involved as it's gone on because I've seen more advertising, it's been promoted more, especially on YouTube with the highlights. I see a lot more highlights coming up, and when I'm coming across BBC One, it's being shown a lot of people on BBC One. So yeah, as it's gone on, I've took more of an interest into it.
Okay, so I've been following the Women's World Cup, and I think overall the pundits are quite good. I think that they're knowledgeable, and I think that they're passionate about the game. So I think it's good to see.
One of the things that I thought was really great is after the US won 13-0 against Thailand, of course Thailand, they put in a really great effort. One of the male commentators, I don't know what his name was, during the next match after that, was saying, this is the World Cup. This is the first time that these girls have played. This is the quality of their sport. Of course they're going to celebrate. This is the first time some of them have played. They're going to celebrate. They're going to score. Absolutely no disrespect to Thailand. They played really well. But these USA women should have celebrated and should have scored as much as they wanted to.
So that's just a snippet of some of the interviews that the girls conducted, and just to emphasise again, they were edited themselves before they then brought them back to us. So once our collaborators heard back from their networks, we had a download session where we started to shape their final recommendations for the BBC. So finally, to bring everything to life, our collaborators presented back their own findings in their own words, which we believe was truly powerful. With us, they presented 2 sessions at the BBC HQ in Salford to 2 large audiences of BBC clients. And just to point out, that picture on the left, there were actually people in that audience. That was just a test shot from the run through. And the audience then had the opportunity for a Q&A again with the collaborators themselves, which we thought was really, really impactful. So I'm just going to hand back over to Steve to summarise.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah, so just a few summary comments for me before I hand over to Phil to talk about the impact that Unfiltered has had, you know, within the BBC. But very simply, you know, we felt this was a very fresh approach from start to finish, taking us all out of our comfort zones, delivering some raw, authentic outputs, combined with some enlightening strategic insights. So we felt that this really added, you know, another dimension to what might have been a standard, more traditional research approach. So from the hiring and briefing and coaching of the collaborators to act as our eyes and ears among their friendship groups, through to the ongoing daily live content being uploaded to a bespoke platform throughout the course of the tournament, and then the seed pair presenting and bringing to life their networks conversations in their own words to connect with the BBC audience. And finally, the collaboration at every stage of the process, you know, leading to a really inspiring journey and actually some far-reaching outcomes, which we may not have got, you know, through maybe a normal approach. So, you know, for many reasons, we felt that this was working very, very well. So I'm going to hand back to Phil now to talk about the impact that this has had for him. So Phil.
Okay,
over to you.
yeah, so just going through why it worked. So I think the debrief that was delivered by kind of our 2 researchers at the actual young audience conducting a debrief worked really well. It was extremely authentic, and it was also emotive, so it really engaged our audience when we're going through the results. And I think that was key parts of the delivery. Those new media habits that, you know, we have talked about in past research to a number of our stakeholders, but I think some of the clips that haven't been shown in the presentation, which we did show in the debrief, it really brought it to life to people. You could really understand just what a huge part like Google and Instagram, these social media platforms play in the media repertoire of our young sport fans. And then another kind of the third point down there, it was really great to see and really interesting to watch it. When we've done research in the past where we've talked to our audience, and we do meet the audience sessions, but you can get a bit of a mixed bag that comes through the door, and can vary in their knowledge of the market and our content. But with this presentation, our researchers were able to kind of have an in-depth and kind of a real knowledgeable kind of discussion with our stakeholders and some of our senior stakeholders around talent. So a number of kind of, not necessarily the famous BBC talent, but some of the kind of ones that more in the background were able to kind of talk about their strengths and weaknesses. They would talk about the market knowledgeably. And I think that really gave weight to kind of the points that we've taken from the debrief. And then the other thing, there was some really good positive feedback from the research, and I think it landed really well. And I think one of the points that Steve and Razor kind of gave when they kind of answered that broad brief is that they were kind of removing that researcher element, delivering the research and insights to our stakeholders, and kind of leaving it to the actual audience. And the positive feedback they gave, I think I could see kind of really empowering some of the members of staff who came up with different ideas that they were saying was really, really good and really effective. But also any kind of constructive criticism around our content, our talent, our execution of things, it's indisputable. Whereas previously in other kind of research settings, you can have a bit of a debate, varying degrees of a heated debate in terms of kind of what's worked and what's not and why. So some stakeholders can walk away thinking, well, I'm not sure they were right on that. Whereas in this case, it's totally indisputable. So it's a young person talking about their network of friends and family saying, this is what we were thinking. You know, you can't kind of answer back on that. So you don't have to take all that on board and take action from it. And then the other thing which is kind of different to other research debriefs is the Q&A. So, you know, the debrief went really well, and I think the Q&A just added lots more onto it, because it started to spark people's thoughts and ideas of kind of things maybe not necessarily related to the Women's World Cup. Some things were related to the Women's World Cup, but other kind of questions and hypotheses some kind of stakeholders might have had started to get raised, and we're starting to kind of pose it to our researchers. And again, we can get that instant feedback around that. So the Q&A part could have gone on all day, but you know, so that was a real positive outcome of it as well. And in terms of like actual actions, so as I said at the start, we kind of understood, you know, from the data and some of the trends that we were seeing, like the importance of, you know, of social media, and what we could kind of get from the debrief is that a lot of the things we were doing on social media worked very well. It's just that the audience weren't necessarily engaging with our social media channels. So some of the ideas that were done by some of the other kind of competitors, if you like, that were referenced with some of the things we were already doing. So that's kind of one example, but it really kind of rammed home the point of going out and to recruit our young audience, and to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of kind of going out to reach and get and entertain this young audience. I think in previous years, I think it's a case of going, we'll make it and they will come. But I think this session really highlighted the fact that kind of we have to kind of really think about how we kind of market ourselves and go out and engage with the young sport fans and young football fans. And the content discovery, so we had some really interesting discussions around this. So we knew that, you know, the figures that we saw, so we know the big figures like the England USA game and the figures like that, but we also have a lot of other content on other platforms. So for instance, we had a couple of documentaries on iPlayer, and we knew the figures for that, and we weren't really sure whether we were hitting the right note with that, or were the owners not really finding it, or was it a combination of both? So from this research, we tasked our researchers with asking them to review it, and their network of friends to review it, and it basically came back saying, no, we really enjoyed it, we thought it was great. The problem is we just were never going to find it, and I think attention was talked about on the previous presentation. They're just not going to go out of their way to go and find these things, so we really have to, we really have to kind of push and surface our content as best we can, and that's been the catalyst for a number of discussions we're having with our colleagues in iPlayer about any content we have on there and how we can best surface it to our audience. And then finally, there was really good feedback around our talent. There was some positive feedback around the fact that they weren't afraid to criticise the female players. They were quite big on that and making sure that, you know, they weren't being patronised, so they liked that. There was other aspects of our presenters that they didn't like. And you know, the conversation, as I mentioned before, the Q&A around that, I think really helped our stakeholders understand the type of talent characteristics we need with our presenters and pundits to really engage with this younger sports fan. So off the back of the success of the Women's World Cup unfiltered research approach, we commissioned a further wave of this, exploring our coverage of the Ashes, which is helping to inform our strategy for the 100 cricket tournament, which hopefully will be going ahead. But yeah, we commissioned more research off the back of the success of this one.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Phil. I think that really does conclude our presentation. The final thing I just did want to say was that, you know, I guess from an audience perspective, we challenge you as research commissioners, I guess, to be more, perhaps a bit as open-minded as you can be when writing briefs, and up for less conventional research methods, because, you know, we certainly believe, as we were certainly demonstrated here, that you'll be more rewarded with richer insights and a more inspiring journey along the way. So thank you very much for listening. That concludes the session. And obviously there's contact details there for us at Razor. But thank you very much.